Hi there, welcome to Prime Time. I'm Paul Orford and today I'm back with Edward from Bullion Capital. When we last saw Edward on here, we had a lot of PMs coming back to us about his in-depth knowledge about gold, the bullion market, and more about a critique about money, which is fair to say, and we wanted to develop that point more today. So what we're looking to do is discuss quite a philosophical point on what is money. Now, I had to go back to my A-level economics to really give you an introduction about the barter system or something like that. Would that be how money initially come around? So taking my notes here, is originally, there's a thing called a double coincidence of wants, and it's made by William Stanley Jevons and Ross Starr. So what they're essentially saying is that if I met Edward, and Edward wanted to sell me that water, and for example, in return he wanted this t-shirt, by the double coincidence of wants we have a transaction. However, if he were to sell me the water but I didn't want to give him the t-shirt, we don't have a transaction and thus we couldn't do it. So on the basis of this, it only works in like a small commune or village and your economy can't grow. So hence how money was developed in a roundabout sort of way, if that kind of makes sense. So there we go.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we go back to the beginning of the time and let's take Cyprus. Paul's got some donkeys and I have some goats and we want to exchange, but Paul doesn't want to sell his donkey right now, but he wants a goat. We definitely need a medium of exchange, and we need something that's going to store that value. So, I mean, money philosophically comes down to three kind of characteristics. One, it's a store of value. Over time, your purchasing power is held somewhere. We need a unit of account. We need something that we both can understand. It's difficult to say, well, how many chickens is one donkey? You know, where does that exchange? And what qualifying a chicken? Is it a little baby chicken or is it an old rooster? So we need some way we can account those things. And then we need a medium of exchange that, you know, we can pass that value from one person to the other. So if we look through history, there were quite a couple of, you know, there are a lot of different ideas that were tried. People use cowrie shells and they pass that around in the islands. There's been tally sticks. There's been multiple, you know, experiments in money. And it came down in the end to kind of gold and silver as a transactional method between people. And it's quite interesting historically to look at that because that was independently decided by the market. Not one person came by and said gold or silver. Different civilizations or different areas of the world, you know, the Egyptians, Tutankhamun kept gold in his tomb. Why? Because he thought he could carry his wealth to the other side in the form of gold. The Aztecs, again, gold was money. They carried this across. So why would we pick gold and to an extent silver as money? Well, we have to go back to our A-level chemistry for that. And if we look at all the different elements there are, I think it's about 46 of them are gas. So not really great to transact walking around with a bag of argon in your hand. Then we've got all the ones that react with, let's say, air and water. You know, so sodium, you know, obviously dissolves in water. You've got ones that catch fire, ones that burn. Again, not really great methods of, you know, carrying value around with you. Then we take away all the ones that are radioactive, and we're actually only left with 5 elements: gold, silver, palladium, platinum, and rhodium.
Yep.
Right. So rhodium and palladium weren't discovered till the 18th century, so no use in money. Platinum has a melting point of about 3,000 degrees centigrade, way too hot for our early kind of furnaces back in the day. So we're left with gold and silver. And if we go back in time, that became the kind of currency of the realm in different countries in different ways. But there's a problem with gold and silver. It's not very divisible, it's heavy, and nobody really wants to walk around with all their wealth in their pocket every day because you can get robbed and you can lose it. So what started to happen is goldsmiths and the kind of initial kind of idea of banks became where people would hold that gold and silver, normally at the goldsmiths because they had a safe, and they would issue pieces of paper. And they would say, all right, Paul would come, you know, Paul would go traveling around, he would write out a check saying, I promise, you know, tell the blacksmith, dear blacksmith, please give Edward, on present of this note, a bag of silver. And we start getting the beginning of money and currency. So this continues kind of throughout history. And you know, central banks as they grow start to have deposits and holdings of real gold and real silver that backed up what today we call fiat currencies.
Yeah.
But in those days were currencies, they were backed to something. And I'm sure everyone watching this will remember the Bretton Woods and Nixon pulling off dollar off the gold standard. So this is the first real invention of a fiat currency, you'll hear, because now it's backed by nothing. Before that, it was always a promise, and I've brought along with me some notes just out of interest, especially this one here. This is an old British £1, which a pound actually meant a pound in weight, and it was for sterling coins. Those were silver coins of the realm. So this note was worth a pound in weight of those silver coins. And actually on this note, it has a nice little inscription. It says, "I promise to pay the bearer the sum of £1. So in fact, this is just a note of debt. It's an IOU. It's not a payment. Where the silver coin is a final payment or a final settlement. So that's an interesting kind of distinction of how these have changed over time.
Also, as well as a side point, that pound note is probably like the Brexit Party's peak queen when she looked the best. They probably want to bring this back, don't they? So yeah, they love that. That's when that's real nostalgia for them, isn't it? Anyway, sorry, carry on.
So then we say, but the question now that I think a lot of people have in fiat currency, and we hear this a lot from the cryptocurrency space, fiat money, is I think this kind of money is failing one of the characteristics of money, which is a store of value. And I'll give you an example of that. The US, in the turn of the 18th century, bought Alaska from the Russians for the tidy sum of $7.8 million US.
Yep.
Those same US dollars, they haven't changed in any way or format of US dollars, today will buy you a nice house by the beach somewhere. So what's happened with our dollar? Well, it's lost its purchasing power. So over a longer period of time, the store of value really isn't there. So in a kind of philosophical way, it's not really a solid, sound money anymore. Hence why we call it a fiat. And a fiat means by law, by induction of law. So it's only the law that says that money has a value. And to give you another kind of example, because I love it. So anyone who's lived in Cyprus with us might remember these wonderful. This would buy you in the old days of 2 kebabs or a kebab, and this was almost a night out on the town. Of course, we've left and we're now, we're onto the euro. So by law, these are totally valueless. So if you'd kept your wonderful purchasing power under your bed, today it would be worth absolutely nothing. And talking about currencies being worth absolutely nothing, this is a great example from Venezuela. This is their 10, 50, all the way up to 25,000 bolivars, absolutely worth nothing. Maybe toilet paper is about the only use left for them, or a couple of cents as a collectible.
But saying that though, the sleekness of that note, I'd probably go with Andrex, mate, if I'm honest.
So these are finished or failed currencies. Most of the currencies all end up resulting in this factor. And I think there's an interesting kind of point to discuss there is, you might hear in financial commentary people say the race to zero. And you ask, well, what's the race to zero? I mean, currently the ECB, the Fed are all printing money in massive quantities, and we are bringing that currency down to a zero value. It's a end-sum game of who can get their currency to be worth absolutely nothing. And we can see that when we start looking at the gold price. So gold is the one medium that stays the same in your purchasing power. And as an example of that, an ounce of gold in Julius Caesar bought you a fine costume or a fine suit. Today, $1,500 buys you again about a fine suit on the market. The purchasing power really hasn't changed. What's changed is the value equivalent of that. So in 1970, Brent Woods, $30 gets you an ounce of gold. $30 purchasing power is the equivalent today of $1,500 purchasing power. If we use gold as the medium to weigh those two amounts up. So we can really see the loss of value. And if you went back to 1970 and you went out with your $30 on the street, you probably would get quite a bit of purchasing power that you wouldn't have out of today's dollar. So they run together.
All right, cool. So with that, for $30 of the 70s, would that have intrinsically been the same minus inflation of the purchasing power you could get? Or like in a ballpark it would have been, wouldn't it, surely?
I
Yeah, because like if you think about the average salary, you could measure it that way and figure out where the salary is now, and that you got like
there's a very interesting index, and I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it is the cost of housing in ounces of gold.
Right.
And you actually, if you look over time, over the ounces of gold needed to purchase a house, housing costs haven't really changed. In gold values, in gold term. So the purchasing need and against the wages of those times in gold have stayed quite the same. Everything else is, all our fiat currency is devaluing day after day after day after day.
Yeah.
So I guess the point is part of your place of your portfolio is going out and having some real gold holdings as a hedge against that devaluation.
I mean, it's interesting because we have been, I don't want to sound like conspiracy theorists, but brainwashed to believe that this is the only medium of a transaction which is fiat currency, which, like we discussed when we were off air, you naturally can't go around and shave some gold off and hand it over. But if it's a worthless currency, we mock Venezuela and Zimbabwe, but yet ours isn't. I'm not saying it's going to be there tomorrow, but if you keep inflating and inflating and inflating with quantitative easing, you're not too far off.
Oh, I definitely agree.
All right, cool. No, right, so let's stick with this then. Tell us about gold and essentially how is it a put option, shall we say, or for your, not investment future, but just your financial future as such, to keep your store of value with your net worth?
Well, I think one of the key things that people have to understand is gold has no counterparty risk. It's totally independent. And we have a silver coin here with us. Nobody needs to come and tell me that this is a silver coin. I can go anywhere. I can go to any current country and they will accept it as a silver coin. I don't need anybody to exchange it into the local, money of the realm to do anything. I don't need a third party to come and evaluate it. People understand it's a silver coin. Done. There's no counterparty to this, and there's no obligation to pay. If I have a $100 bill, it's actually the US government who promises to settle that debt for me by holding their note. When I give you that coin, it's full and final settlement. It's done, We've settled the transaction. And actually, the Bank of International Settlement, the only final settlement that countries can do between each other on a balance of trade is in physical gold.
Right. Okay.
So that is full and final settlement between nations.
So really, intra-nation trade doesn't follow the fiat rules as such. They're not bothered by it because they want gold for gold. They're not really going to say, I want your currency for my worthless currency. The international standard is gold or silver.
So I mean, there's a definite settlement mechanism there between nations, and I always say, look at what central banks do. There's a lot of people out there in the market that say, especially from the cryptocurrency side of the market, gold is an old relic. It's totally pointless. It has no place in our financial system. Then why are central banks buying gold constantly? Why does the US have 8,000 tons of gold sitting in the Fed? Why is the IMF holding gold?
Now, as a political point, is it safer for your country if it holds a lot of dollars to sell them off and buy gold? Because you might get a nice bit of democracy coming to your front door, So how would you play this politically? It'd be quite hard, wouldn't it?
I think at the moment there is a big political game going on, and if we look at which countries have been out in the market buying gold, China have been deleveraging their treasury positions, and they've been taking that physical cash and going and buying gold. Russia, after the US destabilized the ruble a couple of years ago, have been adding to their position. Recently, Bulgaria, out of nowhere, turned around and did a 13-ton purchase for their nation because their central bank came out and said, we see a financial storm coming up ahead and we want to have a position on gold. So there's definitely a bit of sense that if central banks are putting the wealth of a sovereign into gold, maybe we should be doing the same.
Well, a sovereign nation is going to become sovereign as such, So there you go. All right, well look, let's end it there. Really interesting food for thought yet again from Edward. So if you want to PM me for when he appears again, anything you want to talk about, so on and so forth, it's always good to put it in front of him because he really does understand how the precious metals market and how it relates to the fiat or FX world all works. All right, everyone, thanks, Edward.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all again soon. Cheers, bye-bye.